We begin the Gemara today on Daf Kuf Daled Amud Beis, 7 lines up from the bottom of the Amud, where it says Omri Nerdoi. Here there's a piece of Gemara which is really an inyan for itself. It's not clear exactly how it comes into this Pedic. This Pedic is talking about workers in a property, exactly what the deal is between the landowner and the worker. But here the Gemara talks about an inyan of Iska. Iska is when you have an investment. We spoke about this when we learned Pedic Ezeu Neshech. If you remember, when it comes to an investment, so you have the financer that's providing the money, and then you have the person that's actually investing. Or let's say in those times, you have a person that has merchandise, and he gives it then to a person to take this merchandise to a place where you can do business with it, to sell, to invest with it, and to make a profit. So the deal over here is that the financer and the investor share the profits of this investment. So the Gemara here will explain different details about this investment or this business deal between the financer, the owner, and the worker or the investor. So Omri Nerdoi said, Hi Iske, when it comes to this investment, Palge Milve or Palge Pekodin. We consider half of it to be like a loan and half of it to be like a Pekodin. And the reason is, Ovud Rabbanon Milse, the Rabbanon established it in this way, the nichale leloive, the nichale lemalve. This should be good for the borrower, which really means the one that's doing the work, the investor. And it's also good for the malve, which means the financer that's providing the merchandise. What does this mean? Because what happens if there's a loss here? There's an einus that happens, and the investment goes bad, and he loses, he makes no profit, adrabe, there's a loss. So now who's the one that loses out of here? If you're going to say that this person that has this merchandise in his hand, it's all treated like a pekodin, so then when an einus happens, he's not responsible because he's just a shomer. He's a shomer on a pekodin and he's potter from an einus, and now the financer will have a total loss here. On the other hand, if you consider it all to be like a loan, I'm giving you this stuff to make profit for me, but it's like a loan in your hands, and any einus that happens, just like any loan, you're responsible for any einus and you have to pay back the loan. If that's the case, if there's any loss that happens, then the investor will have to reimburse and pay him back everything. So the problem is, if you consider it to be all a pekodin, so then there's no investor that's going to want to take such responsibility. If you consider it all to be a halva, so then it's going to be all the gain of the, again, no financer, that is. Let me start again. If you consider it to be all a pekodin, no financer will want to give it to anybody to take, because he knows if any einus happens, if there's a loss, then it's all his loss, all the financer's loss. On the other hand, if you consider it all to be a loan, so then what's going to happen? So then no investor is going to want to take this, because if there's a risk of any loss, it's all going to be on him. It's going to be his loss. So therefore Chachamim said that half of it is a pekodin, half of it is a loan, and therefore if there's a loss here, so then the loss is going to be split between them. Half he's responsible to reimburse, and half he's not responsible to reimburse. So then it's fair. So a person is going to be interested in investing and giving the finances, and a worker or an investor is going to be interested in taking this money and doing it. The loss between them, if there's a loss that happens, is split. That's fair. That's how Chachamim established it. Okay, so now based on this, the Gemara says, Hashte damrinon palge milve. So now that we say that half of this money that he got to invest is considered to be like a loan. It's his as a loan, and whatever happens to it, he has to, if any einus happens, he has to return it to the financer. So if he wants to take this money and he just wants to use it for himself, he wants to drink beer with it, he wants to buy himself beer or use it for his family, he's allowed. Half of it is considered to be like a loan. No matter what happens to it, you have to reimburse that half to the owner. So now if you just want to go and use it for yourself, then just make sure to reimburse that amount to the owner. But Rava says, no. Even though Chachamim considered one half to be like a loan, but on the other hand, it's also referred to as a iske, as an investment. The financer says, I gave it to you to invest with it, and not to use that part that we consider to be like a loan in order for you to go take it for yourself to drink beer with it. But the point is that you should use it as an investment, and it's being called a loan, that if there's a loss, you'll be responsible for the einus of the loss to return it to me. But to take it and not invest it at all and say, Chacham consider it to be a loan, this part is mine, I can do whatever I want with it. No, we don't say that. Rav Barovin says, V'emes, if this investor that has now this money from the financer in his hands, he dies, so nasa metaltel and etzel bonov, So now, this money, or even its merchandise, whatever it may be, is considered to be valuables, movable items, which is in the hands of his children, the Yisaimim. And what's the halacha? Whenever a person comes to collect a loan from Yisaimim, you can never collect from Yisaimim valuables, movable items, only karka, piece of land. So over here, because now this investment is in the hands of the Yisaimim, so and half of it is considered to be like a loan. So it's like a loan of metaltalin in the hands of Yisaimim, and they don't, he can't collect from them. The financer cannot collect this from them, just like every loan. But Rava says, again, the same point, no, it's not considered to be like metaltalin of a loan. Because again, lahachi karele iske, this is why this is considered to be, it's called an investment. It's not just a regular loan. The imays, so that if this investor now dies and the money is now in the hands of the children, lo yasam metaltalin eitzel bonav. It shouldn't be considered like metaltalin by the children that he can't come and get it from them. When it comes to any other loans, over there you say that metaltalin is something which can be taken from one place to another, and it's not something which the malva can collect from the Yisaimim. It's only karka, which is meshubed, that's there, that he trusts that this is where he can collect from the Yisaimim. But when it comes to this metaltalin of the iske, the reason why it's called an iske, even though Chachamim considered it to be a loan, but really it's an investment. And the investment means that this principle of this investment is mine. And then there's profits that come from it. So no matter if it's by the investor himself or now it's by his children that inherited it, doesn't make a difference. He's relying on this iske that he should be able to take back the keren no matter where it is, even if it's by the children now. Omar Rave said, Chode iske, this investment that we're talking about, if it's one investment, and what they did was, it was divided into two documents. In other words, the investment was split into two. Say the malva. This could end up being a loss for the lender, which is the financer, the one that is providing the money here. So to understand this, Rashi explains, based on what we learned already before in Perikei Zeh Neshech, about this investment. So as mentioned, this investment is divided. Half is considered to be a loan, and half is considered to be a pekodon. And the profits of this investment is split between the financer and the investor. But the thing is, if you just split the profits, then there's an issue of ribis, midrabanan. There's an issue of ribis here. Why? Because then it comes out that the investor is getting half of the profit for the portion which is a loan, which is what he invested, with the portion of the money which is like his because it's a loan. And the other half goes to the financer for the half that's considered to be a pekodon. But then there's something else here. And that's all the tirche, all the work that the investor is doing to invest the money, to sell it, or whatever else he has to do. So it comes out now that when the financer gets back the full payment here of that portion as well of the loan, he's getting back the portion of the loan, plus the work that the investor is doing free of charge. The fact that the investor makes profit of half, that's a profit that he makes on the half which is a loan. But this that the financer gets paid back this loan, plus the work of the investor free of charge, so there's an issue of ribis. So in order to take care of this, so what you have to do is, the way you split the profit between them has to be that the investor has to get some more profit here than the financer to offset this ribis. So therefore, the way Chachamim designed it is that any loss that there is in this investment is split between them half and half. They both have to take the loss, half and half. But when it comes to any profit that there is, the investor has to have more profit than, a more share in the profit than the financer. So let's say the investor gets a profit of 2/3 and the financer only gets the profit, 1/3 of the profit. And then there won't be any issue of ribis. Okay, so now what Rav is saying over here is, let's say you have one investment. The example over here that Rashi says is, you have an investment that was split into two. So one investment had a loss of $5, and another investment had a gain, had a profit of $15. So what happens now? If it's going to be divided separately, so then when it comes to the loss, so the loss of $5, you split between the investor and the financer, each one takes a loss of $2.50. Then, when it comes to the profit that there was of the other part of the investment, $15 profit, so here you have to split it 1/3 and 2/3. The investor gets the profit of 2/3, which is $10, and the financer gets the profit of $5. So it comes out at in the end, what's the profit that the financer gained here? he had to take a loss of $2.50, and he had a profit of $5, so he only has profit now of $2.50. That's if you divide it separately in two different investments, it's going to come out that he only gains 2.5. On the other hand, if you take the same thing, but it's really one big investment, so if there's a loss of $5 and a profit of $15, so then instead of dividing it, so you look at it as a gain, a profit of $10. And then you divide that, a third for the financer and 2/3 for the investor. So the third that the financer will gain here will be 3 1/3. That's a third of 10. So it comes out that if you put it together and you don't deduct from the loss that there is in one part of this investment, that you separate it separately and you put it all together, it comes out that he ends up gaining more. It'll be 3 1/3. So therefore, Rav is saying that when you have one investment, it's a good idea to keep it as one investment. Don't divide it into two, because then for the financer, it could end up being a bigger loss for him. And then he says, but if it's today Iski, if it's two different investments, one was today, the next one was another investment of a day or two later, and instead of keeping it as two different investments, you're going to combine it together into one star to consolidate it into one investment, say the delayva. So then it could end up being, in the same example that mentioned before, if you flip it around regarding the investor, so over here in this case, the investor could be the one that will be losing out of this. So therefore, you should keep. So it's the same example as mentioned before, but you just have to flip it around where the investor is the one that gets 2/3, as explained before in the example. So Rava, as Rashi is saying, is just simply giving good advice regarding an investment, that if it's one, keep it as one investment, and if it's two, keep it as two investments. Rava said, Hi man de kobel iske mechavre, a person that receives an investment from a financer. Upasit. And what happened was, in the beginning of this investment, he had a loss. And then he continued working with this money, and when he continued investing with it, Tarach umalye, and he went and he filled again back, he brought it back to its original value that it was. He never let the financer know about what happened. At first there was a loss, and then afterwards now he brought it back to its original amount that it was. Let's say it was $100, and then he had a loss in the beginning. But then he brought it back, he continued working, and he brought it back at least to the principal the way it was in the beginning, $100. Loi matzi amalei, the investor can't say to the financer, Dari me'a'eich pseide ba'adoi, you have to carry with me the loss that there was originally, meaning that maybe you could say to him, if originally there was a loss, when it comes to a loss, and then that loss has to be split between us 50-50. So in the beginning there was a loss, so you have to take a loss together with me. The fact that later I made profit again and I brought it back to where it was now, so then we have to look at the loss separately, and from that we divide half and half between us. That's when it comes to the loss. And then later on, when there was a profit again, he continued working and there was a profit again. So now the profit that there was, that you split only 1/3 to the financer and 2/3 to the investor. So it comes out that the financer will lose out from this if you take into account that originally there was a loss here. But the Gemara says he can't tell him, you have to carry with me the loss that there was originally. Because the financer tells the investor, therefore you continued working for me. I gave you this money to invest, even though originally there was a loss, but then you continued working and you brought it back to the original amount of money that there was there. You continue working with this in order that people shouldn't look at you and say, you're a person that doesn't know how to invest well, you lose people's money, and therefore this is something that you were meichel, that even though there was originally a loss, but you wanted to continue working with this in order to bring it back to at least the principle, the value that it was in the beginning, so that people shouldn't say that you lose my money, you lose people's money, and therefore now that there's a full principle back for what it is, and there's no profit here at all, you have to give back that principle as is to the financer. And he doesn't take any loss on this. Another halacha Rava said, Hanu beitrei the of the iski bahadi adadi. Two people that are making an investment together. So meaning that there's one financer and the investors, there's two investors here that are investing together this money of the financer. And now, verovach, there's already a profit after a certain while. And so one investor says to his friend, the investor, let's okay, that's it. We made a profit. Let's get our profits now. Let's not take any risks further, and let's return everything and split the profits between us. Now, they made a certain time. According to Rashi, that's the pshat in the Gemara. They had a certain time until when they're going to continue investing. But this person says, look, even though the time is not up yet, but we already made a profit, let's split right now. So if the other investor says, no, nirvacht fei, we can still invest and make more profit. The halach is that he can hold him back of stopping the investment at this point. If one investor says to his friend, the investor, you know what, havli palgederavche. So you want to continue investing because that's what we made up? Gesundheit, you can continue investing, but give me at least my half of the profits. I'll take my half, and you continue investing with your half. So the other investor tells him, no, you can't take your half of the profit out of this whole investment right now. Your profit is still subjugated to be here, part of this entire investment, in order to support this whole investment. That it should. I need your part of the profits here in this investment as well to help for this investment. You can't pull out your part yet. Now, if the partner, the investor says, you know what, havli palga ravcha or palga karna. When we got this investment from the financer, so half was mine, half was yours. Give me the whole thing, not just I want to pull out from this whole deal altogether. I want to pull out completely. Give me my part of the profit. Give me my part of the principal. I don't want to have anything to do with this investment anymore. So his partner, the other investor, says to him, you still can't do that. We had a certain time we said, even if we're beginning, we were partners in this investment, so the two parts of the investment are meshubet to one another. I need all this money for the investment, for the entire investment to be successful. You can't just pull out in the middle. Now, if the partner, the investor, offers even further, he wants to pull out his investment right now, his profit. He doesn't want to take any further risks. So he says, listen, niflig ravchev and niflig karna. Let's split the profits, the principal. I'm pulling out all together. And not only that, v'matilach pseide. If later on you're going to have a loss in your part of the investment, darina ba'adach, I'll carry that loss together with you. So you're saying that if I pull out, it could cause you a loss because of me pulling out of this investment. Whatever loss you'll have later, I'll carry the loss together with you. So he's offering a very good deal to pull out right now, even though he's pulling out before the time, but he's offering to carry the loss with him. But still, his partner could say to him, no, you're not allowed to pull out before the time, because mazal the beitrei odif. The mazel of two people that invest together is a stronger mazel. So if we're together in this, if we're partners, so then there's more chances I'll be successful. So you can't pull out from this investment. A person, a worker, receives a property from his friend, and he's not interested in doing the full work. He doesn't want to weed the property. And the worker says, why does it matter to you that I don't weed the property properly? Because I'm going to anyways give you the set amount that we made up that I'm going to give you for me working here on this property. So as we see here, this Mishnah is talking about a case where the worker is not giving the owner, the landowner, a percent of the produce that the property produced. That's what's called a makabel or an oris. We're talking about a chaycher. A chaycher is one that gives a set amount that he says of wheat that I'm going to give you. So therefore he says to the owner, what difference does it make to you if I'm going to weed the property or not? I'm anyways giving you a set amount. But nevertheless, we don't listen to what the worker is saying, because the landowner says to the worker, then after the season is over, tomorrow you leave from this property. And because you didn't do the work properly, okay, I got my payment, I got the money that you, but then what happens? My property is full of weeds, full of grass, full of weeds. So this is part of what your work is, to take out the weeds from the property. Okay, so now the Gemara continues on this point, explaining over here the discussion between the worker and the landowner. What happens if the worker says to the landowner, I'm not going to be doing the weeding during the season when things are growing, but after the harvest, I'll plow the field, which uproots all the roots of any weeds that are here. So therefore, he still says, I'm not interested in weeding during the season because I'm anyways going to be plowing later for you. But still, the landowner could say, I don't accept that. I want to have good quality of wheat from this property. You're giving me a certain percent of the wheat, but if it's growing with weeds, it's not a good quality. If the worker says, you want to have the best quality? Fine, so I'll buy it from the marketplace, good quality wheat. But the landowner could still say, no, I want to have the wheat from my property. I'm not hiring you in order to pay me with wheat from somewhere else, from the marketplace. So he can't accept that either. If the worker says, I'll weed the portion of the property that I'm going to be paying you the percent of your wheat. There I'll weed so you get good quality. But my portion that I get, that I'm not going to weed. That I'm not going to take care of. I'll just plow it later. Still, he can hold him back. So the landowner can say to him, you're making a bad name for my field. People see my field that is full of weeds, and they think, this person has a field that's not good quality, so you can't make a bad name for my field. So that's the reason why, in the end, because of all these reasons, the landowner forces the worker to do his work properly, to weed the property. The Gemara in the Mishnah didn't say all of this. But in our Mishnah, when it said why the landowner could force him to weed in the property, what did it say in our Mishnah? The reason is because if you're not weeding, so then my property is going to be full of grass and full of weeds later on after you leave. So the Mishnah didn't give all these reasons that it says here in the Gemara. So the Gemara Taka says, we don't need all these explanations that it says here in the Gemara and the discussion between the landowner and the worker. Rather, Mishum Da'amalei, Bizra de Nafal. What happens is, even if you're telling me that you're going to plow later on, but if there's weeds here that you didn't weed during the entire season, so then there's seeds. There's seeds from these weeds that are going to fall down into the property. Even if you're going to be plowing later and uproot everything, but because the seeds from then the weeds that are here fall, so then later on these seeds are going to grow weeds again. So you have to weed during the entire season to get them out of here. Yeah, that's what the Mishnah was telling him, that if you're not going to do the job before, then eventually the weeds are going to grow back later. So therefore, he has to do his job properly. A person receives as a worker the property of his friend. And this property is not producing the produce of this property properly. Very little produce that comes out of this property. So here, this Mishnah is talking about a makabel, an oris, a worker that gets a certain percent for himself of the produce that it actually produced, and a certain percent of what it actually produced goes to the owner. But now what happens is it's producing very little. So the worker says to himself, why should I continue working here? It's such hard work and it produces so little. If the property produced at least the amount that you could make one pile of grain, so then he has to continue working here. He can't back out in the middle. And the Gemara is going to explain what exactly this means, one pile. Rabbi Yehuda says, my kitzveh b'kri. How are you giving this measurement of a pile of grain? That's not a good measurement. You can't give that kind of a measurement for a large property, a small property. Ela im yeshba kedei nefila. If it produces enough grain that you can use the seeds of it to then go and nefila means to plant, to go and throw the seeds on the field to plant it again, so then he has to continue working. But if it doesn't produce that amount of wheat, he doesn't have to continue working here. Tana Rabbanon and a Braisa we learned about this kind of case. Hamakabel sada mechavere, a person, a worker, receives the property from his friend. V'lo yasasa, and it's not producing properly. And now the worker wants to back out. Im yesh b'kadei lahamed kri, as the Mishnah said, if there's enough that you can have a pile of grain from this field, chayav l'tapava, he has to continue working. Shekach kosavlai, kaisavlai, because this is based on the agreement that there is between them. This is what you write in the document of the agreement of the worker and the landowner. The worker writes, Ano oikim, I will get up, ve'anir, and I will plow, ve'ezra, I will plant, ve'echtzayid, and I will harvest, ve'emer, and I will gather, ve'edosh, and I will thresh, ve'idri, and I will do the winnowing, and ve'oikim karye kodamach, and I will give you the pile of grain for you. So we see that then v'teisi and you will come, the landowner will come, v'titl palga, you'll take half, va'ano ba'amli, u'benafkes yadi palga, and me, with all my hard work, and with what my hands produced, I'll get half. So it said over here that he says that I'm going to provide you a pile of grain. So as long as it can produce a pile of grain, that's his obligation to continue as a worker. But if you can't even produce that, the field is not producing anything, so he says to him, that's not part of my agreement as a worker, so he can walk away in the middle of the work.
There's no ribis here?
There's no?
Ribis. Yeah.
No. There's no issue of ribis here. It's a worker, there's no issue of ribis here. Now here the Gemara clarifies, what's considered to be a pile? How big is the pile? Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, Kedei shetamet by harachas. That shovel that you use for the winnowing, if the pile is large enough that you could stick that shovel into the pile and it'll stand firm, so then that's a big enough of a pile. Now the Gemara clarifies further how big this pile is. The Shaila was asked, if the shovel stays standing in this pile, but the sides of the shovel are exposed from the pile, it's not covered inside the pile, is that big enough of a pile? Toshamas, brings a raya. Amar Rabavo said, Rabbi Chanina explained me, Kol she'ein kainis shalei, raya pnei achama. The shovel has to be inside the pile, that no part of that scoop of the shovel should be sticking out, that it should be exposed to the sun. It has to be totally covered inside the pile. Itmer, we learned other Amirayim that spoke about the shear of how large this pile has to be. They actually gave a certain amount in the size of the pile. Levi says, Shalish son, has to be 3 saw. The by Rabbi Yana they said, Sasayim, has to be 2 saw. Amarish Lakish, Sasayim Shamru, the 2 saw that this pile is, Chutz Menoit saw. That's besides the different amount of investment that you have to invest and the expenses that there are here for this pile. After the expenses, and if you still have the profit of a pile that's going to give you Sasayim, then it's a large enough of a pile that the work is not allowed to walk away from this property, even though it's producing very little. Now here, because the Gemara brought a certain shear about this pile that Rabbi Yanai said, the Gemara is going to bring different mishnayos and different shiurim that Rabbi Yanai said. Tanan Asam, there's a Mishnah that we learned in Masechta Uktzeh in Peritze Zeisim. When you have olives that don't ripen properly, or Vanovim as well, grapes that don't ripen properly. Beishamai metamen. Beishamai says it's still considered to be food, it could be consumed, and therefore Tumas Eichlin applies to it. Beisilo metar. Beisilo says because it doesn't ripen properly, so it's not considered to be food. So if it's not food, it's not Mekabel Tumah like food. Now the Gemara clarifies, my paritze zeisim. What do these paritze zeisim mean? It's a very interesting expression. Amravuna rishe zeisim, the wicked olives. What does wicked olive means? Olives that are not behaving well. They're not ripening properly. Amrav Yosef, my kara, where do we see the word paritze means rishayim, that it's wicked? Because it says, b'nei paritze amecha yenosu lahamed chazayin. They get up to establish a chazayin and v'nichshalu. And they stumble. So we see we're talking about a shayim that stumble. Av Nachma Yitzchak Ama Mehacha v'hoyled ben paritz shoyfich dam. Ben paritz that spills blood. Avakam or paritze zeisen. What's the shear over here when we say that you have these olives that don't ripen properly, that there's a machlokes whether it's going to be mekabel tumah or not. Rabbi Lazar says arbas kabin lekoida. If you take these olives and you could only get out of the olive press 4 kav of oil, so then that's the amount that's called, till that amount is called paritze zeisim. More than that is already ripening better, and therefore it is going to be considered to be eichel according to everybody. The Bei Rabbi Yanai said a different share, Omri, Sasayim l'kaira. If it produces 2 sa'ah for what it gets pressed there, then it's considered to, up until that amount, is considered to be paritze zeisim. More than that, it's regular zeisim. Now Sasayim is 3 times the amount of 4 kav, because every kav is 6 every saw, that is. Every saw is 6 kav, so it's 3 times the amount. So the Gemara explains, why is he giving a shear that's 3 times the amount? They're not arguing, because we're talking over here about a press, an olive press. It depends how many olives are placed into the press. Rabbi Lazar was talking about a place where how many olives did they put into the press? A quart of olives was placed into the bowl of the press where you put down the wood and you press it. So over there, the shear is 4 kav. Rabbi Yanai was talking about a place where they put into the press 3 times as much, 3 kor, and therefore he said it has to produce more than 2 sa'ah, which is 3 times the amount, in order for it not to be considered paritze zeisim, these unripe olives. Tana Rabbanan, we learned from Abraisa, this is really a Mishnah. It says, Olu bi'ilon shekoichera. If you have 2 people that went onto a branch or onto a tree, first it talks about a tree they went onto that's shaky, it's not a firm tree. And we're talking about over here a person that's tahor together with a zav that's tamei that go onto the same tree and it's shaky, or a b'seicha shekaychara, or onto a branch which is shaky. So tamei, what happens is the person that's on the same branch with this zav becomes tamei. Whether the zav is on the top of the branch and the person is lower down, or the other way around, either way, you're together with him on the same branch and it's shaking and he's sort of carrying you together on it, so then you're going to become tamei. Now here as well, there was a machlokes regarding the shear, what's considered to be a tree or a branch that's considered to be shaky that you become tameh. This tree that's heichidami ilon shekoichera, what's considered to be a tree that we consider to be a weak tree. Amri de Rabbi Yanai, but Rabbi Yanai they said, kol she'ein be'ikroi lochuk roiva. If the trunk of the tree that is does not have the size that you can cut out from it, a roiva, the size of a roiva, so then a roiva of a kav that is, so then it's not thick enough that the tree is considered to be a weak tree that you'll become tameh. What's considered to be a weak branch? If the branch is small enough that you can cover it in your palm, so then it's weak enough that you become tameh. Another Mishnah, Tanan also we learned Tamahalach bebeis apras, a person that's walking in a beis apras. A beis apras is an area, a field there were kvadim there, but then it was plowed over, and now there could be leftovers from a bone of a dead body that if you step on it and you move it, you become tameh. Even if there's just a bone that's the size of a barley, and you move it, you become tameh. So even if it was cleared out, Chachamim still were geyser that this beis apras, you become tameh in it. So therefore, the Mishnah says this person walks in this beis apras al gabi avonim, and he's walking on stones that move around, that are not stable. Sheyachol hasit, so it moves around, and it could be that it moved around a piece of a bone that's the size of a barley, and you become tameh. Or ala adam, if this person is riding on the shoulders of another person, or va'ala beheme, he's riding on an animal. Shekoichan ra. Now he's riding either on a person or on an animal that are weak, which then means that not only the person is placing his weight on the bone that he may touch, but even the person that's riding on his shoulders, because the person on the bottom is weak, so it's your weight that's really causing his steps to be heavier and causing the movement of the bones, of the tumah. So then, tameh, the person that's riding on top, and then the person that's riding on the animal will also be tameh. But if the person on the bottom is very strong and firm, so then the person on the top will not be tameh, because he doesn't cause any of his heaviness does not cause the movement of the bone of the tumah. So now over here on this Mishnah as well, there was a shir given on this. Rabbi Yanai gave a shir. What is it considered? When do you say that the person that's carrying the person on the shoulder that is weak? If this person is riding on him and his knees are banging into one another because of the heaviness, that's considered to be that he's weak. What's considered to be an animal that you're riding on it and the animal is weak? If when you ride on this animal, the animal is matil galolim, it relieves itself because of the weight of the person, so then your weight is also causing weight on that tumah in the property, so you become tameh. Another shir Rabbi Yanai said, Amri the Bei Rabbi Yanai, Litfila or Litfilin, regarding davening and regarding wearing tefillin, Dalit Kavin. The shir is 4 kav. Now, what are we talking about over here? What's the shir of 4 kav? Litfila Maihi, the Tanya, because we learned in the Braise, Hanoisa Masi al Kseifa. A person's carrying a load on his shoulders. V'yigiyaz man tefillah, the time of davening arrived. Pachis medalet kavin, if the load that he's carrying is less than 4 kav, so then you can continue carrying it. Mafshilon la'achayra, you just throw the package to your back. Umispalo, you can daven even while you have this knapsack that's only the weight of 4 kavin. Arba kavin, however, this is if it's less than 4 kavin. But if it's 4 kavin and more, so then you can't daven while you're carrying this. Maniach al gabi karka umispal. You have to put it down on the ground and then you can daven. The tefillin mahi, what's the shear of 4 kav regarding tefillin? The Tanya, whether it's nabraisa, hoya noisa masi al roishay. Person is carrying something on his head. Utfillin v'roishay. And while you're carrying something on your head, you're wearing tefillin as well. Im hoya tefillin roitzitzais. If this is smashing his tefillin, also, it's not allowed. Vim lav, but while he's wearing the tefillin, he's carrying something on his head, and it's not smashing the tefillin. Then mutter, then it's allowed. Now, be'eza masya amru, what weight that you carry on your head is more than allowed that it smashes the tefillin. But master shalar bes kavin. If it's a weight of 4 kavin, so then that's an amount that's too much that will be smashing the tefillin. Tani Rabchia taught again regarding the tefillin. Hamoitzi zevel al reishay, person that is taking out garbage, and he takes out the garbage on his head. Utfilin b'roishay. But he also has tefillin on his head. So then it's not covered to have the tefillin on your head, and then you take out garbage on your head as well. Don't. So now you want to remove the tefillin to be able to carry out the garbage. Don't move the tefillin to the side of your head, or don't take off your tefillin and tie your tefillin to your loins while you're carrying out the garbage on your head. Because you're being disgraceful with the tefillin. So what do you do while you have to take out the garbage? No, don't forget, in those times they would wear tefillin all day, not just by davening. So again, that's why we're discussing this here. So Aval, what he does is kaishram al zroye b'makom tefillin. So you take the tefillin shel reish and you tie it temporarily near the tefillin shel yad on your arm while you're taking out the garbage in your head. Now here the Gemara brings another opinion that argues with what we said before about carrying something on your head while you're wearing tefillin. Yishom debei Shila Amru, by the yeshiva of Shila they said, afilim mit pachas shalahen asur laniach al reish. Even the tefillin baitel, if you want to carry that light tefillin baitel on your head together with the tefillin, that's also not allowed. It's not only what we said before, that you have to make sure it's not smashing your tefillin. You shouldn't be carrying anything on your head together with the tefillin. V'kama, and when we say here you shouldn't be carrying this tefillin baitel on your head, what kind of a size are we talking about? Amar Abaya says, "Afila riva the pumpadisa." Even a riva, a quarter, a riva of a riva of. She says this is a riva of a litra on pumpadisa, which is a very small size of a tefillin bag. Even that you shouldn't be carrying on your head together with your tefillin. Now going back to the Mishnah said, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, my kitzva bekri. How can you give me this measurement to say that a worker, if he can produce a pile of grain in the field, so then he's not allowed to back out from the job in the middle? So it depends if it's a large field or a small field. So therefore he says, Elam yesh bakri nefila. If he can produce enough in this field that then you can then go throw the seeds and to replant this field, then that's the amount that he has to continue working. But if it's not enough for that, then he doesn't have to continue working. Now, the kama kedei nefila. How do you measure what's considered to be enough seeds to be able to replant the field? Rabbi says, Omer Rabbi Yechanan, the name of Rabbi Yechanan, arba saw on the core. You're going to need 4 saw of seeds to be able to plant a field that produces a core. Rabami delay Omer, but Rabami himself said different. Shmeina saw on the core. You need 8 saw of seeds to be able to plant a field of a core. So you need double the amount. So now Amalei Ahu Sabal Rav Chama Bereid Rabbi Baravue Asberulach. So he explained and said that they're not really arguing. That's why, because it depends on which time period. Bishani the Rabbi Yechanan, in the lifetime of Rabbi Yechanan, have a shmei nara. The property, the field was better quality, and therefore you only need half, 4 saw to produce the core of a field. But Bishani the Rabami, in the years of Rabami, generation later, have a khisha ara. The properties, the fields, the quality was much worse, and therefore you needed double the amount of seeds to be able to plant there. Now the Gemara brings from another place where there's a similar shear mentioned, Kadei Nefila. So Tnan Hossam, we learned in the Mishnah in Peya, this is talking about the halacha of leket, which is anything that fell from the owner that was collecting his grain from the field. So what falls belongs to the poor people. Haruach shepizra sa'imrim. So what happened if you had a bunch of the grain all over the field and now a wind came and spread everything around and it covered that leket that was there, left in the field for the poor people, but now it's covered by all these grain in the field that you can't see what belongs to the poor people. So you have to estimate you have to estimate such a kind of a field, how much leket, how much usually falls for the poor people, and that's what you have to give for them. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says we don't make such a kind of estimation. Rather, what we say is Naisan la'aniyim kedei nefila. You give for the poor people as much as you need for seeds to be able to plant this field. Now the Gemara here explains v'kama kedei nefila. What's considered to be this kedei nefila? How much seeds you have to throw down into this field? Like we said before, arbas kavim lekor. That's the amount of 4 kav that you need for a kor. But now on this, there was an ibaye Rabbi Yirmiyeh lekor zera. Are we talking about over here that the core of how much you have to plant? Or lekor tvua? Or we're talking about for a core of how much it's later going to produce of tvua? What's the shear of a core? Are we saying you need 4 saw for 4 saw or 4 kavin? That is, sorry. Do you need 4 kavin for the core that you want to plant in the field, in the size of the field, or for the 4 core of tvua after the field grows, after it produces the tvua? That's one shaila he asked. Another shaila he asked was, if it's for the core of the zera, lamapailas yad, are we talking about a person that's planting, a human being with his hand is planting, or lamapailas shvarim? Or are we talking about when you have oxen that go around in the field and they are the ones that spread out the seeds in the field, and when they spread it out, it's much more than what a person spreads out. So Tashema, the Gemara answers, the Chiyasi Rav and Omer Abavua, Omer Abalazar, Vamir La, Omer Ab Yechanan, Arbas Kavan Lakor Zera, that it's 4 kav that you have to have of seeds for a core of a field to plant. So it says a core zera, not for a core of the tvua that grows later. That's the shear of the core here. Va'adayin tibaylach, but the second shaila still remains a shaila, l'mapaylas yad, l'mapaylas shvarim. Are we talking about the way a person seeds the field, or the way the oxen seed the field? And take that remains unresolved.